Greetings and salutations! I hope this video finds you doing well wherever you are in the world. It is the 4th of July weekend here in the United States, Sunday, July the 2nd to be precise, and some mythical people out there have Monday off. Not me, or anybody that I know. And the 4th of July is actually happening on Tuesday. So you go figure that one out. The whole week is just completely screwed up. Anyway, it's been a while since I posted anything. I've had a lot going on. Not much has popped up, but a couple of things have come along that I'm going to talk about in this video. There's not going to be much to see on the screen here, boys and girls, at least not until the very end. So this is basically 3 quick things put together in one video. First, I want to give you my comments on the Red Hat drama. I want to talk about scripts and Python, and I want to talk about learning Python, or attempting to do that. And I want to talk about something I got wrong in a past video. And finally, I'm going to show you how I actually customized my Linux Mint desktop, because I've had a couple of people ask about that. So let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about Red Hat. There's a lot of brouhaha going on out there in the Linux world about Red Hat and the fact that they are now closed source. They have announced that they are no longer going to provide downstream open source code from the Red Hat Enterprise Linux project. It's not going to happen. So essentially, they are becoming what Chrome OS is. Chrome OS is a closed source implementation of Linux. And if there is any open source downstream from Google, it's probably very old and very different from what you actually use. Sort of like open source versions of Android I have seen. Now, I'm not going to get into all of the details. You can go read this for yourself. This mainly affects people who are running servers and in the past would have run CentOS, which was a free and open version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux that you could download, and it was for a while community developed, and then it was actually run by Red Hat themselves. Now what you got in CentOS was actually very old code from Red Hat, but it was extremely stable, which made it appealing for servers. For a desktop, CentOS was an absolute joke. You would not want to run CentOS as a desktop. I don't know anybody that did it, because the software was just so old. So CentOS got screwed up when IBM bought Red Hat. They didn't get rid of it, but the first thing they did was they put out CentOS 8, and they said they were going to support it for 10 years. Yay, that's great. Then, about a year later, they said, nope, we're not going to do that. We are changing over to something called CentOS Stream. And that was a rolling version of CentOS. And those who had been using CentOS on their servers because of its stability and reliability said no, and they didn't want to use that. The Linux community responded like it always does, and it created a couple of distributions that were based on Red Hat to take CentOS's place. And we had Rocky Linux and Alma Linux come along. Well, now it seems that IBM is looking at that, and they don't really understand the dynamics of the Linux community, and they're going, why are these people taking money out of our pocket? Close the source. That's exactly what they're doing. That is a statement that came from them that is in this article from CS News. I was looking for their reaction, and I found it here. I will put a link in the description to this video if you want to read this. There's not much here. It's a very short little article, but it still gave me what I was looking for, and that is just confirmation from them that, yes, we are a for-profit company, and we do not care about distributing open source software. How this affects Fedora, I don't know. Never been a fan of Fedora, but I can tell you one thing, I'll never talk about Fedora on this channel again, because Fedora, even though it is a quote-unquote community project, is still a test bed for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and I don't want to support them if they're going to go forward this way. Now, Red Hat is a product that is well worth the money you pay for, especially if you are a large corporation or if you are a government agency that needs absolute reliability. You need to be up all the time, and you need to have the resources of those who can fix problems and train your staff. I get it. But Red Hat Enterprise Linux, for somebody like me who just needs something to run a server, one server, doesn't make sense for me to buy that. And so CentOS has been a good solution for me on my server. It won't be for long, I can tell you that much. There are those, I have watched several videos from people who have said that this has to be against the GPL, that it somehow must be illegal for GPL, whatever version you use, or any other open source license. Guess what? It's not. Red Hat is perfectly within their rights to not distribute anything that they put into Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Nothing. What they are obligated to do by the GPL is to provide patches upstream and give credit to projects upstream that they take advantage of. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to pass what they do along to other people. There is nothing in the GPL that says that you can't sell software. There's nothing in the GPL that says that you can't open source software. However, it has been a gentleman's agreement, let's say, in the open software world since the days of GNU that you would share what you did because you were part of a community. If you wanted to sell it and make some money off of it, that's perfectly all right. But you would make that source code available for anybody out there who wanted to take a gander at it, check it out, make sure it was secure, see what you were doing, that sort of thing, and maybe implement it on down the line. The way Red Hat sees it, and I am reading this quote, is that those who do not want to pay for the time, effort, and resourcing going into RHEL, or those who want to repackage it for their own profit. That's what they see their source code going to. Not community oversight, and not helping people who they wouldn't be able to make any money off of to begin with, like me. And they said that this demand for RHEL code is disingenuous. Well, too bad that I don't have a webcam, because you would see my middle finger waving right now toward Red Hat, because I will never have anything to do with you ever again. Look, guys, Linux has a problem in that it is a community-developed operating system. But when we are relying on corporations to give us the big distributions that everybody else is feeding from. Okay? This isn't just a Red Hat thing. It's also a Canonical thing. All right? Canonical gives us Ubuntu. They take Debian, which is problematic and hard to use for even an experienced user like myself without spending a lot of time looking at the documentation and figuring out the weirdnesses. They take that and make it relatively easy to use and freely distribute it. However, they have a profit motive. Canonical is a corporation that is there to make money off of the Ubuntu Foundation. The reason why Ubuntu is freely available is because Mark Shuttleworth gave $10 billion to the Ubuntu Foundation that states quite clearly that it will always be available for free download. That's why you can do that. But Canonical as a corporation still has to try and figure out ways to make money. They have been doing that with the Red Hat kind of model of business where they're going to take and sell services, and they're going to sell support agreements. They ruffled some feathers because when you go to Ubuntu nowadays, if you're updating from the terminal, you'll see a little blurb that comes up and says, hey, if you pay for this Ubuntu Pro account, you're going to get updates to the universe what is it called? Help repository. My mouth didn't want to work there for a little while. And you're going to get all of this extended support and whatever. The catch with that is not the money. It's the fact that you send them an email address. You have just told them who you are. You lose your anonymity. Anonymity. This is a great day to make a video. No, I swear to God, I have not had a drop to drink. I'm just kind of about this, man. It's just, as a community, we rely on these big corporations, and we need to stop doing that. We need to stop thinking in those terms. We need to be more community-driven and use community-developed distributions of Linux. Linux Mint, for instance, is not a for-profit organization. They take code from Debian, they take code from Ubuntu, the base, and then they put their own spin on it, and they still respect the upstream while they do it. That's what it's supposed to be like. Okay? If you make a donation to Linux Mint, you ought to make a donation to Ubuntu, and you ought to make one to Debian as well, because this is where the upstream is. We're not doing that. We are just using it. We're just taking it. We're looking at it as a product, like something that would come from Mac or something that would come from Microsoft, that they're selling you or leasing you. Actually, you don't actually own an operating system from Microsoft or Mac. You have the right to use it, but it's still theirs. You're leasing it. And that's if you get into the EULAs and you want to read all that legalese. And so, I mean, there's lots of distributions out there that are really cool, like PC Linux OS. That's a completely community-driven distro. I haven't played with it in a long time. I'm going to be playing with it very soon. There's all kinds of things out there like that we really need to be focusing more on, and let these corporations do what corporations do. And I don't know, that's my feeling about it. I have some mixed emotions on it because, like I said, Red Hat is perfectly within their rights to do this. Would I ever use their product? No. Because it's got the name Linux attached to it. And Linux means free and open to me. It's the same thing with a Chromebook. You know, when you're buying a Chromebook, you are getting a closed source Linux distribution on that Chromebook. It's not Linux to me. It's Chrome OS. It might have a Linux kernel, but I can't have any real control over the system because it's all locked down. Same thing with Mac. Some people say, well, Mac is based on Unix, isn't it? Well, it was. I don't know what it is now. But anyway, we could go on and on about that. I would love to hear your responses, though. I would love to hear what you have to say. Am I going to quit using Ubuntu? No. I think I've got it on a couple of machines. I've actually got it running on my file server here and 2 laptops in the house. I'm probably going to stick with that because Canonical, even though they, have done things in the past like Amazon searches and the Unity Dash and the current push for an Ubuntu Pro account, they have they're looking for revenue streams. They're trying to support what they're doing. And for right now, that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. But if they close their source, guess what? I'm not going to use them either. And I think we all need to prepare for that because the corporate kumbaya, let's all get along, Microsoft loves Linux BS, I think that's over now. I think that's completely out the window. I think that was a very bad period for Linux. And I think it's time that people within the community realize that we're on our own and we need to be doing things on our own. Love to hear your thoughts. I had an experience just yesterday that really, it took me down a rabbit hole. Now, those of you who are people who have watched the channel for a long time, I put up a video where I was talking about virtual machines and VirtualBox, and one of the things that I was talking about in there was if you have a virtual machine, sometimes you need to shrink the virtual disk image file that the VirtualBox hard drive lives on. And in VirtualBox, that's known as a VDI file, virtual disk image. And as usually the way it works is if you have a file that is dynamically allocated, as you use the operating system and you write things to the disk, even if you delete them, that file will continue to grow until it gets to its full size. Now, the reason why that's happening is because let's say that you download a file that's a gigabyte on your guest machine, and then you use it and then you delete it. Well, the ext4 file system in Linux and other file systems don't necessarily go back and rewrite zeros where that file was. All it does is unlink it. As a matter of fact, you can go back and sometimes get files. It's like an undelete. There's not really one in ext4, but it's not entirely impossible to recover data that way. Well, that's what fstrim does for an SSD. That's exactly what it does. Is that when you run the fstrim command on your computer, if you have a solid-state drive, it goes through the file system, and anything that has been deleted but has not been written over is basically marked as zeros. So with a VDI file, virtual disk file, that's the first thing that you need to do before you can shrink it, because the shrinking utility has to be able to look at it and figure out where this unused free space is. So you have to basically remove all of the data off the drive. The old school way of doing that is to write zeros for the entire size of the drive. That's what this program this code on the screen is. It's a little thing that I wrote called pre-shrink VM, and essentially you install this in the guest machine, and what it does is it will write zeros to the drive using the dd command and then delete it. It'll just create this giant file called zero, and it'll get rid of it. And this is a pretty cool little tool, because if you just fire it off and just pre-shrink VM, it just does what it's supposed to do, right? But then you can pass to it the home argument, and if you do that, if you have a VM that has a separate home partition and you want to shrink that as well, you can. So you have to run this first, mark everything with zeros, and then after that you close the VM, and then you use the command at the command line to shrink the file. This should work with fstrim. It does not. Apparently, fstrim doesn't work with VirtualBox machines even if you put a tick in the box that says solid-state drive, which basically tells VirtualBox that you're storing the VM on a solid-state drive. Pass that information along to the guest. Well, the trim function is not supported for whatever reason, and I don't know why. Because trim has to be supported by the device that it's stored on. It's not just the operating system itself. And most SSDs can do that on a lot of thumb drives as well. So if you try and run fstrim on an old spinning drive, it won't work. It'll come back and it'll say, Actually, fstrim doesn't tell you anything if you just run it. You have to really poke at it to get the program to tell you what it's doing. You have to go in and you have to say, give me a verbal output and show me what you did. And then you'll find out whether it's really running or not. Or you can look at the exit code. Anyhow, I told you all of this to tell you this. First of all, when I told you you could do that in that video, I was wrong. You can come get this utility and you can use it to blank out the free space on your drives. Super easy. There's instructions on how it works. You just install it in the VM and boom, that's all you got to do. And it's available for download on my webpage right now. It's on a repository at GitHub. And it's absolutely free, and no, you don't have to tell me who you are. I don't want your patches. I don't care. Do whatever you want with it. I am free and open source, and I don't care. You can do whatever you want, okay? Now, the knock-on of this is that I was trying to figure out what was going on, and then I remembered that I had this tool. And I'm over 40, so I had forgotten that I'd actually written the tool. And I finally remembered. I was like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Didn't I write I wrote something to do that. Oh, let me go see if I... Well, sure enough, I had it up on GitHub, and I was like, you idiot. So I started looking over this, and I was like, man, you know, I did a good job writing this, and it got me curious about something. See, several years ago, I got very much into this idea of writing scripts, and when you write a script for Bash, it's a combination of commands that fire off other programs, and it's also the Bash programming language, which is kind of its own thing on its own, right? And when I was learning this, I also remember saying to myself, I really need to go learn how to write Python, because all the cool kids are writing Python these days. I'd like to know how that works. So when I was going through all this crap with this yesterday evening, I said, let me go on YouTube. I mean, if I'm teaching people how to write Bash, somebody out there is teaching somebody how to write Python. And sure enough, there is on YouTube. There's a lot of videos where people are showing you how to write Python. And a lot of those people are talking about how you have to go out and buy software before you can write Python. You have to go get this certain editor and you have to pay for it. And they're talking about using Microsoft Visual Studio, and they're talking about using Macintosh and stuff like that. And I found very little so far people saying you can write Python on Linux, which I know you can, and you can do it for free, right? I will find those videos. I know they're out there. But see, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, is that Linux is going to give the kid who doesn't have the resources but wants to learn how to code the ability to get his hands wrapped around all of these very powerful tools and teach himself how to use them. The kid who doesn't have any money and is very poor can't have a Mac, can't afford to buy the editor, can't afford to pay for your course that you're putting up online, even if it's very reasonable, and you say, well, you know, you can have the entire course here and for $100. For a kid who's growing up in poverty, that's not a lot of money. That is a lot of money, excuse me. That's money that he can't spend, he doesn't have. And one of the great powers of Linux is that it is free, and I mean free as in free beer, boys and girls. That it gives people whose backs are against the wall a way to do very powerful things that ordinarily they wouldn't be able to do. This is the most important thing about Linux. I know for a fact that I can learn how to write Python, and I can do it using this editor here, which is the Pix editor. All I need is somebody to teach me how to do it. I don't need the fancy editor that lets me run it in a terminal down there. Or maybe there's one that's available for Linux that I haven't found out about yet. But if you go online and you just say, I'd like to learn Python, as I did, the first thing that you get in your face is all of this, you got to pay for this and you got to pay for that. This is where the Linux community is falling short in a big way, is that we are not evangelizing what our community stands for. We're not going out and telling people what we're doing enough. We got a backlash. 5 or 6 years ago, there was all this drama and there was everything going on, and we have people who are in our community who are cuddling up with the corporations, and they really don't want to go out and find the new users, and this has been going on for years, and man, we need to stamp it out, because it is going to kill the Linux community, because it's going to let the Red Hats and the Microsofts and the Canonicals of the world just roll right over it if we don't stand up for it. So that's the rabbit hole that I went down. I was really surprised. I was like, what? You know? Anyway. Last thing I want to talk about is my Linux Mint desktop. I've had several people ask me about the theming and how I get it to look like this and how I set it up. Well, here we go. First off, this is what Linux Mint looked like when Linux Mint 17 came along. So how many years ago has that been? 6, 7 years, right? And I really liked this look, and so I have stuck with it. The Linux Mint developers have left all of this in their themes You don't have to download anything. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just go with the theme. Essentially, it's all Mint X, okay? So the first thing that you need to do, if you want my setup here, is down here on this panel. You need to go to, when you first install Linux Mint, one of the first things you see is the welcome screen. So let's go ahead and get that. And then if we go over here to first steps, you'll see that you are presented with the choice of having a modern panel or having a traditional panel. Pick traditional. That will give you the box here instead of having everything just be an icon or a launcher. All right, so that's one of the first things that you need to do. You can choose colors here and stuff like that too. Now, the next thing, once you get this panel there, is to go here and go to Panel Settings. And I set mine to intelligently hide the panel. And it takes it 250 milliseconds to actually hide and 750 milliseconds to reappear. So that is 1/4 and 3/4 of a second respectively. So if I take this, you see how that disappeared? And now it'll come back. But it takes it a little while to do that. The next thing I like to do is set my panel to be rather large. It's right there. And then you can also change your text sizes to go along with stuff like that. As for the menu, where I have a wide menu button here instead of just having the little icon, you can go here and then go to Configure. And you can choose to have text, which I have. You can put anything in here you want. You could put in my computer. You could put LM rules, you know, whatever you wanted to do. And then I always pick an icon size of 32 points because that's what these are right here. So, and then you can also change how the super key works, also known as the Windows key. And of course mine is just like this. And for the first time since I started using Linux, and that's been many, many years ago, I actually have a keyboard that does not have a Windows logo on it. Where the super key is. So yeah, you can play around with all these settings here. It's a lot of fun. Now that you have your menu, we go in here and look at themes. I also like to put launchers down here for applications I use all the time. Also over here in favorites. And let's go to themes. And what I am using now is the black, what do they call it here? They call it the, well, whatever that is, Babata Modern Classic. They were using this in Linux Mint Debian, this particular cursor, and I liked it, so I kept it. Everything else is Mint X, Mint X, Mint X, and as far as the panel is concerned, that's just Linux Mint. So it's the old Mint X theme, and the icons are Mint X. Another icon set that I really like, but I haven't put in here, is let's see if they're available, because I didn't even look. I've been using the Mint X icons for so long. Oops. Clicked the wrong favorite. Get the settings there. Thank you. No, I did it again. You did it again, man. That's the one you want. All right. Don't hit me. It won't help. So let's see if they have this available. And let's see what we've got. We've got a bunch of minty. We got Adwaita, which is that is GNOME based. Those are really cool. So that's what these look like. Let's see what those icons change. It's not a huge difference, as you can see. I used to download GNOME High Color, which is another one, but I like Adwaita as well. I like the old gaudy icons. I am not a fan of the modern little boxes, although the Mintex icons are sort of like that a little bit. They're square icons, but I can hang with them. Now I'm looking at Adwaita and I'm thinking I might want that. Yeah, those are old school. Those have been around for a while, like this icon for Rhythm Box here. That's all right. Let's go back to Mint X. I'm used to it now. So that's there. That's how you do that, and that's how you end up with this look on the desktop. And one more thing that people have asked about is the theme for my terminal. It is basically this theme right here that I have tried to replicate, and it's called Cobalt. So when you choose themes for editors, I know this is true of the text editor for GNOME and a few others. The Cobalt is a theme that's available. It's available here too for Xed, and I wanted kind of the same thing in a terminal, so that's why I have this same color. So if I go here and I go to Preferences, and I always create my own profile. So I go to Colors, and then the background color is Custom. It's a custom color. So let me see if it'll let me see that. Yep. So what you need to do is you come in here to Custom Colors, and pause the video if you have to and get a pen right here. You need to put in color number 111C34. That is essentially that cobalt blue background. And then I also like to have it slightly transparent, which is, for some reason or the other, when I was using Linux Mint Debian, when I first put this computer together, I wasn't getting proper video acceleration out of it. I do not know why. I never did figure that out. And I couldn't do a transparent background, and it was solid. But I like to be able to just see the desktop through. And the reason is real simple. If I have something going on and I have something open back there, I want to be able to know it. Okay, especially if I have a full screen terminal. And then I turn the menu off on the terminal. I don't need the menu. That's all available right here with a right click, so it just gets in the way. You can play with it all you want to. It's just GNOME terminal in there. That's how they do it. That's it. And this is my desktop. So I'm glad somebody likes it. And then as far as the backgrounds are concerned, if you go to easylinux.com, then you can actually download this and a couple of the others that I use all the time on the YouTubes. So you guys can check that out there for free. Just go click on it, right-click it, and save image. That's all you got to do. I don't own these pictures. These are things I've picked up on the internet through the years. I'm not, I'm not redistributing them for money, just making them available. So you can go check that out. And by the way, that is a Stanton 500 on a Technics SL1200 with a Technics head shell right there. And that's as old school as it gets as far as turntables is concerned. Are concerned. Is concerned. We're concerned. We'll be concerned. I'm concerning myself with leaving and going off and doing something else now. Comments, suggestions. I want to hear from you. Put them down there. I read everything that you put in there. I might not respond to everything, but I do read it. So I love to hear from you. Those of you celebrating the 4th of July, I hope it's a safe and happy one. We'll do it again soon.